MagiFelix, you are playing the game for 15 years. Stop playing it. Consider your life.
And a lot of it was inspired by the rank 1 player in EU, MagiFelix. I've been watching a lot of his games and I really like the way he interprets the meta.
We're witnessing history in the making. EU West solo queue prodigy MagicFelix is about to break 2,000 LP for the first time ever in the Western scene.
See what happened to MagicFelix? He disappeared again, right?
Mr. President, it's finally an honor to meet you. I'm going to ask you a question about MagicFelix and the so-called dark truth behind him. Do you happen to know anything about it?
I must admit, I'm not familiar with pro player MagicFelix from League of Legends. I'm a bit of an old school guy when it comes to sports. Give me a good game of basketball or football any day.
He leans forward, his eyes sparkling with curiosity.
But tell me, what's the story behind this pro player MagicFelix? What makes him special?
Well, Mr. President, I must tell you, it is a story to tell. So sit back, relax, and let me get onto it.
When people think of absolute solo queue gods, they think of well-established legends like Faker or Dopa, but there is one person that far exceeds even their solo queue achievements, MagicFelix, otherwise known as Felix. This European super prodigy at one point had 5 challenger accounts which occupied rank 1, rank 4, rank 6, rank 7 and as well as rank 24 in the European West server. This effectively amounted to over 5,000 LP in total. Not only that, but MagicFelix also managed to have 5 accounts in challenger at the same time, while one was in each role in July 2020. MagicFelix also reached rank 1 multiple times throughout the seasons he has played, but nowadays MagicFelix is nowhere to be seen in the pro scene. After just 1 year in the LEC, MagicFelix never really came back to the franchise leagues or competitive play at all. So how can such a rising prodigy, often regarded with high respect, decay his talents to just solo queue? What really happened to MagicFelix and what's the dark truth behind him? Before we continue, let's have a look at today's sponsor, CyberGhost VPN. Virtual Private Network, or VPN, hides your IP address, encrypts your data and redirects all of your internet traffic to a secure VPN tunnel. CyberGhost VPN provides this software as a global leader in the privacy and security industry with over 38 million users, and they're the most recommended VPN on Trustpilot. And if you've ever been frustrated that you can't see your favorite show because you live in another country, then no worries. I, for example, managed to watch Detective Conan movies on Netflix Japan. You know, the thing about CyberGhost VPN is that it unblocks over 40 major streaming platforms, including Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, and BBC iPlayer, so you have unrestricted access to all your favorite content, no matter where you are geographically located. You can surf the web with no limitations, no matter if you're traveling for business or pleasure. The bottom line is that you will never be blocked from accessing your favorite websites, especially with CyberGhost VPN's over 11,000 servers located across 100 countries. They also have a no-logs policy, so they never record or store any customer data. CyberGhost VPN is very user-friendly, and they have an app for all major platforms, including Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, smart TVs, and gaming consoles, and Linux. And with one subscription, you can protect up to 7 devices at one time, so why not share it with your family? If you use my special offer link in the description, you can get 84% off, and on top of that, 4 months free for their 2-year plan. That means you're paying a little bit over $2 per month. You can sign up for CyberGhost VPN risk-free, and if you didn't like their services, then no worry, as they have a 45-day money-back guarantee, so why not try CyberGhost VPN out? I really appreciate it to anyone who supports me and the work I do on this channel by using the link. With that being said, let's get back to today's video. MagicFelix comes from the Umeå area in Sweden and started casually playing League of Legends in 2012 when he was just 12 years old. His dad introduced him to the game and they played until level 15, and from then on onwards, MagicFelix set out for himself and continued to play League. Towards the end of season 3, which was in 2013, MagicFelix climbed from gold to diamond 1 in a couple of months' time. From there on out, he would consistently manage to stay within the high challenger area as the seasons went by. He actually says that he first hit challenger on the European, Nordic and East server, which is often nowadays considered as a mediocre server, but he would likewise reach challenger on EU West after he transferred his account in season 4. After this period of solo queue, he decided to venture into competitive League of Legends. MagicFelix recalls that he duo queued a lot in challenger with Cedrion, and after some time they eventually ended up being picked up by Euronext Gaming. Oh yeah, and if you didn't know, before in League of Legends you could actually duo in challenger and even masters tier. MagicFelix spent a year for the team Euronext Gaming, which participated in the national leagues in Germany called ESL Meisterschaft. Towards the end of his tenure in Euronext, MagicFelix played in the Europe Challenger Series 2017 qualifiers. Sadly, his team would barely qualify for the spring season, reaching 3rd place after being unable to beat Nerve and Fnatic Academy, which was, favored to win at the time. But it didn't have much to say for MagiFelix, as Red Bull had a spot in the EUCS and thus picked him up for the ensuing season. The European Challenger Series scene to MagiFelix was pretty much aligned with his expectations. According to an interview by Red Bull, MagiFelix stated that
my only problem was that the best of 2 system is inferior to best of 3. While I understand that people see it as a more fair system, it leaves a lot of room for upsets, and you can frequently go 1-1, even if you're clearly the better team. In League of Legends overall, you cannot afford to make big mistakes, but sometimes they're inevitable and you lose. I think that in a best of 3 format, this upset window is narrowed down to a minimum.
In the beginning of Season 7, while being with Red Bull, he went to Korea for a month. They were originally there to try out players Mojin and Thal. These players were of high caliber to say the least, as Thal would end up later playing for SKT and Hanwha Life, whereas Mojin also later played for Hanwha Life. Red Bull ended up practicing by scrimming versus the Chinese Developmental League and the Korean Challenger teams. For purposes of this video, I managed to actually get an interview with MagiFelix, and one of the things he said about his time here had a sad touch to it.
We scrimmed Knights, Team Young Miracles, and never ate multiple times. Surprisingly, Fufu stood out as the best mid laner I scrimmed while I was there. I still remember when he absolutely bodied my Zeta Syndra with a 30 CS gap at 10 minutes. In solo queue, I reached rank 7 with 240 games played. My win rate towards the end was around 60%, so if I stayed there a bit longer, I thought I would have gotten rank 1. I played multiple games against top players like Dopa, Crown, Faker, and Rookie, and had the advantage over them when I was on Katarina. I think that was the beginning of the end of my career. I thought I had reached the top of solo queue, and there was nothing exciting left to strive for other than the same old thing.
MagiFelix continued to roam between the national leagues for the next 3 years, going to Movistar Riders, which played in the Spanish National League, and as well as going to YouthCrew Esports in 2018, which played for a Turkish league. What's important to note here is that the experiences of MagiFelix's teammates in Movistar Riders seems to have been genuinely positive, with many coming with positive statements and even joking about his dedication to playing League.
About Hatrix, I think outside of the game, I think he's really funny, he's a nice person. I like him a lot. In the game, I think he's really good mechanically, but I think that he's not that smart as Felix.
Hatrix is nice for short term, I think, but I think Felix is nice for long term because I like the quiet and the chill type, so I would probably pick Felix.
MagiFelix, as a player, he's very thought through. Every action or everything he does in the game has a reason behind it. He's really disciplined, doesn't take risks.
Hatrix as a player, he's very aggressive and confident in his plays, but sometimes they can backfire, because he didn't consider all the variables.
Movistar Riders though was fielding a 10-man roster though, and it was somewhat like a switching thing or like a substitute thing as far as I'm concerned, but for MagiFelix he was the starting mid laner for Movistar Riders, but they later decided to go with Hatrix, which was the substitute mid laner since he was a more aggressive mid laner that fit their playstyle more. MagiFelix's early period in the Spanish league was not off to a good start, but regardless he continued to have the confidence of the coaching staff, and over time his skill rose and ended up being a key piece, especially in Movistar Riders' victory over Giants Gaming in Barcelona. It's important to note that the 10-man roster was chopped down to just 5, with even Flaxish and Blue Razor leaving Movistar Riders too. In 2019 though, Fnatic gave him a chance in their academy team Fnatic Rising. This team would play under the British National League UKLC, which turned out to be a great success for this team. MagiFelix and his team would consistently win the UKLC at the #1 spot throughout his time there, while contending in the European Masters with varied results. But all in all, MagiFelix's time in the National Leagues would be a double-edged sword. On one side, it would have a dark stigma attached to him that seemingly would be consequential, but on a more positive side, he learned to separate solo queue from competitive play and became a much better team player. During this whole amateur esports arc, MagiFelix had garnered an extremely prestigious reputation from his solo queue achievements. Reddit had posted about his shocking achievement in September of 2018 that he had 5 accounts occupying rank 1, 4, 6, 7, and as well as rank 24 in the US, effectively amounting to over 5,000 LP in total. As far as I'm concerned, no one has really achieved this except for MagiFelix. And when preseason for season 9 came around, MagiFelix tweeted that he got rank 1 in the offseason just in time before the LP reset. And with that in mind, one could see his MagiFaker account as rank 1, his MagiFelix account rank 6, MagiFelix account at rank 8, MagiFelix 5 at rank 9, and the original MagiFelix account at rank 10. All in the same screenshot, and every of his 5 accounts were in top 10 at this point. You could see that in total he had 3,229 ranked games played on all of these accounts combined. So let's say if you assume that a league game is on average 27 minutes long, MagiFelix would have had played for about 60 days straight fate of League of Legends. Obviously, this is just a ballpark estimate, as Challenger games have 1 in 3 games ended in a surrender vote. But you see, there is a counter argument to this, because there is also a thing that MagicFelix would have quote-unquote invented, the MagicFelix mental.
My name is MagiFelix, and I'm gonna show you guys how to like win most of your games. You just don't let your teammates' gameplay affect your gameplay. You're just gonna play worse. Yeah.
But I want to hit you.
I don't care if you end, I'm just gonna play my game. It's not within my control if I lose the game, is it?
But I have 1 IQ.
It's hard to find where the MagicFelix mental concept first came up, but it seems to be a term coined after seeing MagicFelix's personality in the works. For instance, when he gets completely ran down or target ended, he has seemingly no emotional response, such as this one time where he was being ran down and said basically nothing. He would also frequently and vehemently decline the surrender vote, even in situations most people would perceive it to be a no chance of winning. I mean, even when the enemy team is hitting your nexus. Nevertheless, this type of mentality is what many League players should strive for, and many do, although they are unable to. But nevertheless, MagicFelix's legacy coined the MagicFelix mental term. I had the liberty of asking MagicFelix what he thought about this coined meme term about him, and he said that he thinks the meme spawned from the fact that he never tried to write anything that could trigger anyone, never surrendered, and always did his best to win. However, nowadays apparently MagicFelix only hears about his MagicFelix mental thing when his teammates are pissed off that he doesn't surrender their game. Regardless, he thinks it's overall a nice thing to be known for though, but he also noted how the high elo ladder nowadays is infecting everyone with its hostility, and frankly it makes the game less enjoyable for him, and hey, even for me personally speaking as well. And well, he has even more achievements. Apparently he managed to get Challenger in 2023 by playing every single champion once. He was quite literally inventing his own challenges since he's basically done it all. And when the 2v2 arena mode was around, MagicFelix also got rank 1 playing it. He mentioned how he had a blast playing arena, but he thought that it was just too bad that the ladder was horrendous in terms of accurately measuring skill, and matchmaking wasn't much better either. And you'll probably not see him play it anymore unless this is fake, as he told himself as such. And since Riot is seemingly making it even more casual nowadays, it's unlikely he'll attempt another rank 1 grind. And by the way, during MagicFelix's reign as rank 1 on the normal solo queue ladder, other challenger players had taken to social media to complain about their LP gains being relatively low. This was usually attributed to MagicFelix having such an incredibly high LP differential to his peers. MagicFelix also told me that there is some interesting lore to this, and he thinks that this is his most underrated accomplishment. This was when he reached 1450 LP back in Season 8. Literally everyone in Challenger began losing LP due to the way the system worked at the time. People don't realize that LP values fluctuate over time. If you convert the 1450 to 990 LP lead I had over rank 2 at the time into percentages, it's a 46% difference. Translated into the current EU West ladder, it would be like rank 1 having a 700 LP lead over rank 2 with 2230 LP. My LP gains at my peak were around +7 -30. The only reason I could climb that high was because I had a lucky win streak with around 90% win rate in my last 40 games, and that was after I had already reached rank 1 by a large margin. But there's also a little fun side to this story. He lost all of his LP on this account eventually, and not because of him losing or decaying, but because he was getting DDoSed for weeks straight until he was forced to decay. This is actually documented on Twitter with a few personalities talking about it, such as Gilius saying that MagicFelix is getting DDoSed by some toxic people in EU solo queue. Twitter also seems to have caused these subsequent DDoS attacks because there were many league memes where everyone was essentially thanking MagicFelix for the LP losses, and some would even joke that they were going to grief him to restore the gains.
It was caused by the Twitter league memes where everyone was thanking me for the LP losses. Some or even joking that they were going to grieve me to restore the gains. Someone thought it would be funny to DDoS me. For the next weeks I would disconnect for just over 3 minutes every 15 minutes. Perfectly timed so I couldn't finish a game without getting lever penalty losses. I have some suspects, but I won't mention any names due to lack of evidence.
Now MagicFelix also had a few more other achievements on other servers, such as getting Challenger in Korea and as well as China, but he wasn't on these servers for very long. He was there only to bootcamp, but nevertheless he managed to get the high rank. But what's the secret to MagicFelix being so consistently damn good? Well, Thankfully, he did a more thorough interview with Dong Hoop, and the information we get from this and other sources make me believe that there are 3 things that makes MagicFelix the legend he is: consistency, structure, and mentality.
So, what do I mean by all of this though? Let's break it down.
By consistency, I mean that MagicFelix will always be a player in a team that performs well, merely because he is consistent. He always has a structure to how he approaches League of Legends that keeps him consistent, and that is also paired up with his mentality. Both of these other attributes reinforce and enable him to be consistent, and just by being a consistent player makes you incredibly valuable, especially in a competitive setting, as you can always rely on predicting that MagicFelix will do well on average in each game he plays. By having him on your team, you can opt into more aggressive players on your roster that are more risk takers, and if those risks don't pay off, you can always count on MagiFaker to hold the team up. By structure, I mean that MagicFelix has a set of procedures or a way of doing things when a League of Legends game starts. This, of course, is a more advanced concept to talk about, but maybe he thinks about his and enemy team composition, their win cons and weaknesses, how the 2v2 is played out, and maybe he plans what he will do for the next 3 minutes while playing League. And this set of structure that he has, which may or may not be automatic, you know, in the sense that it's muscle memory, enables him to be a consistent player by relying on his proven methods. His mentality, though, reinforces him to do the structural approach he has to League over and over again. He always believes in winning and never giving up, and having no emotions impact his structural approach or otherwise gameplay enables him to stay consistent for a long time. There are also nitty-gritty types of concepts that make MagicFelix somewhat unique, such as him usually not opting to roam as a mid laner, but rather exerts pressure by being out of vision. But I think these 3 concepts has helped MagicFelix consistently reach top 10 in multiple seasons. There are a few videos out there that document how well MagicFelix play, and there's, for example, the interview by Dong Hoop or guides that was created by him while he was in Astralis. MagicFelix, though, always wanted to go to the big leagues, especially to the LEC.
I mean, of course, as a player, like, my end goal is to be playing in LEC and not in Academy.
However, there would be a dark stain attached to his reputation that would seemingly linger on for several years to come, and could possibly be attributed to the death of his whole career, namely in 2018, in his venture in YouthCrew esports, where he played in the Turkish national league called TCL. MagicFelix's time in the TCL was abysmal to say the least, and would have stark consequences for his reputation. Before MagicFelix came into the picture, YouthCrew had participated in the TCL 2018 winter season. Here, YouthCrew had a somewhat adequate result, getting 4th in the overall winter season with a 13-15 record, while ending 3rd place in the playoffs. But towards the summer season, they swapped the mid laner Coco for MagicFelix and added a few more substitutes to their roster. Their following summer season would be really tough though. They would go on to finish 7th place with 9 wins and a whopping 19 losses. Things were not looking good for them, as this placed the team in the relegation spot, and they would have to play against promoting teams to fight for a spot in the TCL. YouthCrew esports would go on to play against Pars esports and lose 1-3 to them, and in the elimination round they will play against Galacticos, where they miraculously won in a near 3-2. But when meeting Pars esports in the finals again, they would lose to a straight 0-3. As such, YouthCrew esports was completely relegated from the TCL, and would subsequently see all players leave the team, into it eventually disbanding fully, and the esports team's social media would also be deleted for good. I attempted to recover some of this history, but sadly Web Archives had nothing archived for their Facebook or Twitter page. Now, regardless, your boy Hazmat here has done his due diligence and had to dig through the Turkish YouTube space, and after some digging I managed to find a reference regarding the start of the MagicFelix anti-social rumor. This rumor seems to have been originated from one of his former teammates in YouthCrew esports, namely Elvin. Elvin was the top laner in the team and had decided that one day prior to him playing the relegation matches with his team, he would retire by starting his streaming career. He would go on to say that he has a lot to tell about his experiences. So the story goes is that I found this Reddit thread from late 2018 titled MagiFaker, who is currently rank 1, rank 5, rank 9, rank 10 and rank 28 on the US ladder, has been relegated from the Turkish LCS, TCL. In this post there was context added by what I assume to be a Turkish league viewer, Ringed King. A few days ago, a well-known Turkish esports player, Elvin, who played for DP once and this year for YouthCrew alongside with MagicFelix and aka Fjoragod, decided to be a a streamer and stop playing LoL professionally. He talked about a lot of things about their team and Riot Games Turkish, and they were really shocking. When it comes to MagiFelix, he said that Felix was one of the most antisocial kind of people, and that the Mother Gooner was hesitant to speak even when he was hungry, and until someone asked him whether he is hungry, he wouldn't tell for days that he is hungry. That is, he was not communicating with anyone, and that's why he was not successful even in TCL. I posted this because I saw a number of posts asking why MF is not being thought by LCS teams. All in all, even if he's a really good mechanically and have several accounts in Challenger on the US server, he's not the kind of player that can play for any team because he doesn't know how to communicate with people and is a really bad teammate. For more information, you can check Elvin YouTube channel. It is in Turkish though.
I love rumors. Facts can be so misleading. Were rumors true or false are often revealing.
Subsequently, after some more digging into Elvin, I found his original statement that was made on his stream.
Var mı? Bilgisayar var mı? Yatacak yer var mı? İyi, geliyorum o zaman. What?
Peki Felix, normalde biz çağırdığımızda Türkiye'de terör var deyip gelmemiştik ilk sezonlarda.
Neyse
Belki
abi
ondan
bak,
korkmuştuk.
adam geliyor sonra, tamam mı? Geliyor böyle. İlk geliyor işte, değişik bir tipi var işte, hani Türkiye'de görmeye alışık değilsindir büyük ihtimal. Geliyor böyle kapıdan, şöyle duruyor, şöyle bakıyor işte. Asosyal, tamam, direkt anlıyorsun duruşundan böyle, hani yürüyüşü bile bir değişik yani. Hani şimdi adamın fiziksel özelliklerini zaten zurtuna laf etmeyeyim de biraz değişik yürüyor, biraz değişik hareketler böyle, anladın mı? Bir böyle...
Anladım abi.
Şey yani, bir değişiklik var çocukta. Neyse, çocuk abi geliyor böyle, ilk oturuyoruz, konuşuyoruz falan. Böyle tam işte adamla bir şey sormuşum, 10 saniye önce, 5 saniye önce falan cevaplamış, tamam mı? Bir sessizlik olmuş. Adam birden kalkıp gidiyor. Koşarak solo queue'ya giriyor böyle, tamam mı? Hani bildiğin adam deli. Adam solo queue atıyor sürekli böyle.
5 tane challenger hesabı olan değil mi?
Evet, 5 tane challenger hesabı var. Adamın dünyası... adamın dünyası solo queue olmuş lan. Şey böyle, evden dışarı çıkınca güneşe çıkan vampirler gibi oluyor, direkt solo queue'ya koşup böyle kan içiyor. Böyle solo queue'da direkt kan içiyor, anladın mı?
Anladım abi.
Neyse, adam abi asosyalin önüne gidene konuşmuyor. Çocuk konuşmuyor la. Konuşması böyle adamın bak. Yani neden böyle bilmiyorum. Adama mesela diyorsun ki MagiFelix işte bir şey diyor, adam böyle yere bakıyor. Bak sen buradasın ya, adam böyle. I think it's fine.
Anladım, yüzüne bakmadan.
Aynen, yüzüne bakmadan kısıcık bir sesle böyle, adam istese hani böyle şey, sesi var yani çocuğun. Sesi çıkmıyor değil. Falan diye konuşuyor. Anlamıyorsun bir şey. Tamam, fazla şey yapmıyorsun, takmıyorsun çocuğa, tamam mı? Kendi dünyasında takılıyor. Büyük ihtimal gelme sebebi buraya. Adamın evinde FPS problemi var, interneti falan kötüydü, yatağı bozuktu falan işte. Dedi lan bir Türkiye'ye gideyim de işte.
Solo queue atmaya yer buldu.
İnternet kafe üstüne de para versinler dedi. Geldi buraya. Adam o kadar asosyal ki. Geldi abi, 2 gündür yemek yedi mi yemedi mi bilmiyorum. Çocuk böyle oynuyor, sadece oynuyor, tamam mı? Çocuk kimseyle konuşmuyor. Yanında yemek sepetinden yan yana oturuyoruz çocukla. Yemek sepetini bir açtım, işte bir şey söylüyorum. Daha önceden biliyor oradan söylendiğini. Bir şey söylüyorum böyle. Direkt böyle oyunu bırakıp "Can I order two?" falan yapıyor böyle. Direkt adam hani yanında yemek sepetini açmasam gelip şey demeyecek yani. Acıktım ben, bana yemek verin demeyecek. Ona utanıyor.
Ha, utandığından
artı unutuyor.
Solo queue'dan dolayı unutuyor.
Neyden dolayı unutuyor bilmiyorum abi. Direkt adam unutuyor, tamam mı? Neyse, bu çocuk da böyle dedik, kabul ettik.
To me, that is perhaps one of the most abhorrent behaviors I've seen from a pro player, to completely over-exaggerate and disparage someone this hard. The statements made by Elvin also seemingly lack context, as Felix mentioned to me how YouthCrew was a dumpster fire. Apparently halfway through the split they stopped paying the roster, and thus the roster had stopped practicing. I asked MagiFelix about these rumors as well, and he said that he thinks some of their concerns were legitimate if you put it in a milder form, just like he stood by in a Swedish article in 2021. By normal people's standards, MagicFelix was avoidant of interacting with others, and his personal hygiene could have been better, just like the rumors say. However, he also takes issues with the narrative set out by others, because they do create a one-dimensional view of him. Besides of him being young, the truth of the matter is that most of the teams he was on performed as expected or better. In fact, throughout MagicFelix's whole career, as we will explore, he was an individually strong player for a large part of his career. When these narratives mindlessly repeats like MagicFelix can't perform in competitive games, MagicFelix don't talk to anyone, then that's all that people are going to think when they hear his name. That in itself is true, even though that the narrative is being established is missing all of the ways in which he made positive contributions and helped his teams make better decisions. Anyways, there is also another instance of this so-called antisocial rumor that came up relatively recently. In 2023, Treatz had talked about his experience with MagiFelix. You see, Treatz and LS had a lot of collaborations during co-streams of LCS and LEC in 2023. They eventually talked about MagicFelix, and there Treatz publicly talked about his experience. According to LS, Treatz had said that,
I asked Treatz, one of his former teammates, what possibly happened with MagFelix, and he said that he thinks he quit the game. Also mentioned that MagFelix had a lot of IRL issues on teams, and thus teammates would sort of have to take care of him and remind him to do very basic things in real life, such as eating and cleaning and showering, etc. Made it sound like perhaps with the lack of success in League and how much he played that possibly he just walked away. Treatz seemed to have thought he did indeed stop.
Now, this statement was attempting to answer what happened to MagicFelix, as in 2023, some Redditors asked whether he quit League of Legends. Treatz added some context to this comment though.
Just to add on to this, I played with Felix many years ago, and these were things that he had discussed openly as well back then. I don't know exactly where he is now, many things can change over time, and I don't have all the answers here.
Red Bull also made an article ranking the best LoL players in the UK LC. Here they mentioned how MagicFelix was known for choking in important games at the European Masters and Turkey's TCL, both events that have a relatively huge audience, and TCL would require on-stage presence. Also, don't take this for granted, but it might explain this one thing. MagicFelix was streaming consistently from November 2018 to January 2019. He would occasionally stream up until August 2019, with his highest month being 51 hours and the lowest month with just 9 hours. He picked up streaming in January 2020 to July 2020 a bit more, and reinvigorated his stream once more in December of 2020 for just 3 hours. So basically, this one Reddit comment I saw mentioned how he publicly used streaming as a tool to combat his anxiety and stage fright, and it seems like he used the off-season from his TCL endeavor to practice playing for an audience. I'm not sure if this is 100% true, so do take it with a bit grain of salt. His Twitch career seems to not have any activity prior to late 2018, even when his Twitch channel was created in 2012. MagicFelix would genuinely have a good streaming career if he streamed, as if we run it by the numbers, he garnered over 35,000 followers in a couple of months, and at the start of his supposed streaming career, he had between 700 to 1,000 average viewers. This viewer count would consistently stay high, as he would even have over 500 average viewers for those meager 3 hours he streamed in December 2020. But why didn't MagicFelix continue streaming, since it could genuinely be a career for him? He told me in an exclusive interview that he stopped streaming because he simply didn't find it enjoyable. He would rather play solo queue and focus 100% of his attention on trying to play well and improving at the game. Streaming for him was just testing the waters, but he eventually found it distracting to have hundreds of people watching him in the back of his mind, and thus ended up dropping it completely to focus more on his game. Now, these antisocial rumors would continue to be perpetuated by the League community. Statements about his antisocial behavior, lack of communication, and so on kept on coming left and right when on the topic of MagicFelix. But context is of course required here. TCL was MagicFelix's biggest and first time he was on stage consistently. Prior to this, he had very limited experience with being on stage, whereas most of these instances were mainly on LANs, cups, or playoffs, so TCL was his first stepping stone. Furthermore, these statements were only done by one person in the past, when MagicFelix was just 18 years old. These rumors seemed to be very prone to exaggeration and even very rude. Even MagicFelix would admit to this, so in a 2021 Swedish article that interviewed him. We'll get to this later more in depth, but just take it for granted for now. And we also cannot omit the contradicting testimonies of his former and future teammates. You have the former movie star Riders teammates, which we've heard from. The jungler Dan also talked positive things about MagicFelix as a player. Cedrion, who knew him since at least the Red Bulls League team, said that he's a really good mid laner. He's probably the most talented mid laner to not play in the LCS at the moment. His characteristics outside the game are also on point. Motivation, work ethic, thought process. Basically, when I see Felix practice, I want to start practicing even harder myself. What's also interesting is that according to 2 Reddit comments I have found, his dad came out on Reddit to defend his son about the antisocial rumors that seem to have an impact on his career. This comment was not as viral as I thought it would be, and I found it by sheer coincidence on another Reddit thread in 2018. Under the account The Senior Manager, he wrote,
"This might answer most theories about Felix here. Felix is my son. He is only 18 and has played professionally for 2.5 years. Felix plays few games in solo queue but wins a lot. Many others play much more. This spring he got 2 offers from LCS teams but ended up choosing TCL. Of all YouthCrew members, he made the most average damage in all games in TCL, while the YouthCrew ADC and support had the worst stats of the series. He is not a social type of person, but communicates and gives interviews no problem. He does not choke in important games, but he is careful and methodical. See what the movie star Ryder's teammates say about him. Felix played 28 out of 32 games in series, and the other mid laner hat-tricks played 4.
There is no 100% confirmation whether this is Felix's actual dad, but he does sign his name as Jonas, which, according to my research without attacking someone's privacy, I would like to say that this account is almost 100% his actual dad.
But I digress. The point here is that he does speak some truth though.
MagicFelix did indeed, on average, have the most damage percentage share of his team over the season, while his ADC's average damage was one of the worst among his peers. The support of YouthCrew was more of a middle pack in terms of stats, but he didn't have as many games played as MagicFelix or the ADC. This information of course comes from gold.gg, but despite all of this, MagicFelix still found his way to Fnatic Rising 3 months after leaving YouthCrew, and for a moment, those rumors seems to not matter whatsoever. While reaching challenger level in all 5 roles, he had won all 4 UK National League titles in 2019, 2 UK League Championships, and as well as 2 Forge of Champion titles. And while they were favorites going into the European Masters, they still performed well, reaching top 4 in both of the 2019 European Masters, but suffered in the 2020 European Masters. Even one of his teammates was interviewed and said,
"I think Felix is one of the smartest mid laners I have played with in my career. However, I wish throughout my time on Fnatic Rising that he would play more aggressive, because I think we could have dominated mid-jungle 2v2s together. I think his strengths are his ability to be self-sufficient and to be a very stable player alongside macro knowledge at a high level. His main weakness is the champion pool that he's willing to play on stage. He has his main staple picks of Corki, Azir, Cassiopeia, so he's usually very predictable."
MagicFelix was perceived to be so good that when in 2019 he was called up as an emergency substitute for the Fnatic LEC team. For the LEC 2019 summer split, Fnatic announced that Reckless was going to be benched for their LEC match against Rogue. MagicFelix was stepping into the mid position, while Nemesis, who was the mid laner at the time, was going to play bot lane. This was MagicFelix's LEC stage debut, and just like in the UK LC, MagicFelix would show that he could do it in the big leagues. While he performed good individually by having the biggest damage in the game, and as well as a lot of resources up on his counterpart, his team did not win. In fact, they kind of held him back, which MagicFelix would jokingly state in an interview post-game.
Well, I feel like in that game they were hinting me, man.
What's also funny is that you can actually see MagicFelix's nervousness, perhaps, or maybe it's more of like a rookie vibe to him, as when the teams usually do a handshake or greet each other at the end of a game, MagicFelix was just sitting by his PC, completely oblivious to this fact. Perhaps he forgot himself, or maybe he just wasn't aware of this tradition, which I do think is kind of funny. And to be fair, MagicFelix, the LEC DPT, and the Nemesis, who wasn't playing in his main role, were doing way better than the ones who were playing on their main role. But nevertheless, this debut was kind of important, as people started to see that the rumors regarding MagicFelix was in fact exaggerated. Those rumors were completely overblown. Reddit overblowing something they know nothing about yet again. This shit can literally ruin people's careers. He looks very comfortable, hope to see him on an LEC team one day. The Magician did well for his first LEC game, hard to win the game with top jungle bot inting. MagicFelix did good in my opinion. I agree, he probably outdamaged the rest of Fnatic combined. It's also important to note that MagicFelix did go on an interview with the shot caller and talked about his debut match. This did indeed kind of dispel all of the aforementioned rumors. But what was the real cause for this weird substitution of Reckless? Well, Veteran, EMEA pundit, had revealed the possible cause. Unfortunately, the stream of this is no longer available, but according to some Redditors, it was something of an internal conflict within the Fnatic team. What the nature of that internal conflict is, I have absolutely no idea, but I'll add some added context in this video, or corrections if I have something wrong, and if I ever get to know what the cause or the nature of the internal conflict was, I'll put it in the description. Fnatic took note of this, and MagicFelix was soon to be promoted to the LEC as a substitute player for Fnatic, even while simultaneously playing for Fnatic Rising. When Fnatic qualified for Worlds 2020, Fnatic needed to have a substitute for their roster, and so MagicFelix was their best choice. Already having played in the LEC and as well as his superb solo queue achievements made him the perfect substitute to choose for their main team. But at the same time, there was some drama regarding this though. The Worlds event was occurring in China, and MagicFelix was already there with the Fnatic team prior to the announcement of him being a substitute. Presumably, they already had made arrangements with Riot Games in advance, but people over in the European Masters scene were worried, as this event was also ongoing, and the star player for Fnatic Rising was in China. But Fnatic, of course, would later announce this and announce a substitute for MagicFelix for the Fnatic Rising team. Worlds 2020 for MagicFelix was uneventful. He would duo with Selfmade, the Fnatic jungler, while they were in China, which caused some nice clips. Furthermore, Selfmade also recalled how MagicFelix was playing well and even surprised Selfmade when they played scrims with him. In this case, MagicFelix was then playing support rather than mid because Hylissang was having a fever at the time.
It's actually awkward because I remember when we were at Worlds with Fnatic and Hylissang went to hospital because he had 37 degrees, right? And they instantly took him to the hospital in a fucking body suits and shit, like he was a zombie in a zombie apocalypse. And then we played with scrims with MagicFelix, and he was playing support, and he was actually playing fucking well. We were winning every game with him. He was popping off on Bard.
Some people also memed about his prowess with his presence in China, such as Alice tweeting this on Twitter.
MagicFelix has 11 out of the top 10 accounts on Chinese solo queue. Insane.
Can't wait for the super server's top 10 ranks to look like this. MagicFelix 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I will trade 1, MagicFelix 8, G2 Mexicano. An article by Invent Global reported that on October 13th, 2020, of the players that are still competing in Worlds 2020 after the group stage, there were only 23 of them being challenger on the Chinese super server, of the 40 total players. One of them, of course, was MagicFelix with 621 LP as rank 242. His teammates Reckless and Selfmade were also challenger, but for Fnatic, Worlds 2020 would be disastrous. I go more in depth regarding this in my video on how Fnatic ruined Nemesis' career, where my information is based on a person who had first-hand knowledge of the events that transpired. So if you want to know more about this disastrous events for Fnatic, have a watch on the top right and go to that video. Nevertheless, all eyes were on MagicFelix at this point, as he has increasingly had gotten more of a positive standing in terms of his esports career. And with the Fnatic contract expiring in late 2020, MagicFelix had to go elsewhere. Sadly, MagicFelix didn't seem to join any LEC team for 2021. Behind the scenes though, things were moving. Apparently MagicFelix said that he was somewhat close to joining Dignitas back in 2021 instead of Astralis, but he decided against it because it would entail a 3-year contract, and that was simply just too long for him, as he was already starting to lose motivation during this time. But in the spur of the moment, there was light for him. MagicFelix got an opportunity to prove that he was a true LEC level mid laner. YouthCrew, which was occupying the Astralis starting mid laner spot, was opting to take a competitive break due to personal reasons relating to his health probably. MagicFelix goes on to say that.
I always thought myself that I was good enough to play in the LEC, so it felt sad to remain in the national leagues year after year. When I didn't get the place in the LEC at the beginning of 2021, I decided to take a break from professional gaming and focus on fixing my problems that prevented me from getting a chance. It was very surprising to me. Coming into the split, I was not expecting to play in any LEC team, so I was just planning on taking the spring split off, and I was basically one-tricking Nico in solo queue, so I didn't have any competitive champion pool, you know. Then, all of a sudden, Astralis messaged me and they asked if I wanted to sub in for YouthCrew. I had maybe 1 or 2 days of practice with the team before I flew down to Denmark and joined them there.
MagicFelix also told the Swedish media Expressen that he was hesitant to accept the offer from Astralis as they were on the bottom of the table, and being a part of an underperforming team would lower his stocks, so to speak. Felix also says that Jeskla, who was his former teammate in Movistar Riders, was the one who recommended him to Astralis. MagicFelix was signed on the spot and heard up as an emergency replacement to this already failing roster. Failing, of course, due to it being a completely new roster that was 1-6 until MagicFelix came into the picture. It was a hype to some people, but many thought that Astralis would be many steps behind other LEC teams in terms of preparation and synergy with an entirely new mid laner. Even some speculated that this could be a potential career killer. MagicFelix did say that this opportunity was his first time in having a good chance of playing in the LEC, and even though it was a team who was failing, so to speak, it didn't really face MagicFelix.
I think I would have taken any offer, you know. I wouldn't decline to play for a team because I think they're too good for me. That doesn't really make sense. If you don't have a spot in the LEC, it's always better to play for an LEC team than it is to not play.
As the 2021 LEC spring season went by, Astralis' roster was having a lot of issues, but mainly about team cohesion, inconsistency, and failure to closing out games despite having leads. They were still able to pick up games, but most of the match stains would result in them either blatantly losing 0-2 to strong teams or go 1-1 against middle of the pack teams. And of course, they managed to beat Vitality 2-0, which was the weakest team at the time. But how was MagiFelix's performance after finally getting into the big leagues? While Astralis was doing bad as a team, MagiFelix, individually speaking, was performing good, and he would even be credited with carrying Astralis, which one sport GG writes, for example. During his few matches in the team, he showed some exceptional plays, such as versus Schalke 04. In that game, he came out on top with 34% damage distribution and had almost 26% of his team's total gold. Astralis' top laner White Knight also commented that their performance was almost capable of bringing down the likes of Fnatic and Rogue with their close games. MagiFelix was also known to have a champion ocean at this point, since he had been playing everything and anything, and as well as other roles than mid lane. In fact, prior to coming to the LEC, he was one-tricking Nico for a period in solo queue despite this champion not being meta. Oh, and just a little side note here, it seems like the reason as to why MagiFelix one-trick ponied certain champions for some periods of time, like Cillian, Nico, Katarina, was because he simply wanted to learn them more. Astralis, formerly Origent, was definitely looking better than their last season, which in summer 2020 with Nukeduck and of course an entirely different roster landed 10th place. And of course, after the first season with MagiFelix was the frontrunner of the total team's damage to champions with 28% compared to all other mid laners in the LEC. This number is of course a bit skewed since MagiFelix has 7 less games than the other mid laners, since Nukeduck was playing in their early season before taking a competitive break, and MagiFelix also enjoyed the highest kill share of his team at 27.2% with both of the 2021 seasons combined. The LEC caster Foxdrop meant that MagiFelix was one step away from being something special.
That being said, he had never been able to make a significant impact on the rosters he played in tournaments such as EU Masters, but it always felt like he was just one step away from being something special, not necessarily a flashy player, but reliable and consistently good. I really hope he can take that next step.
Despite saying this, Foxdrop did admit in 2019 that MagiFelix was among 4 others of the best performing players by roles. As the spring split finished, a new season would of course naturally be the focus for Astralis. With Nukeduck out of the picture, MagiFelix was then signed for another split. Kasper Witt, the director of sports at Astralis Group, mentioned this. Since day one, he was shown much of what we are looking for in an Astralis player on and off the server, and I'm glad we have now agreed to continue the relationship for the remainder of 2021. I look forward to continue working with Felix and believe we will see his full potential over the coming months, and he is fully integrated to the team and our ways of working with our players. Astralis would bootcamp and even have team building activities, and interestingly enough, the team went on some sort of a fishing boat tour, but sadly no video content was made of this. The summer split for Astralis went way better than their previous 2 seasons. They would turn out to win more decisively, taking even the likes of Schalke 04 and SK Gaming, while tying against other teams who were considered middle in the pack. MagiFelix also did this legendary play where he backdoored Misfits with Silas. However, towards the end of the season, there was one crucial game that Astralis had to absolutely beat if they were going to make playoffs at all, and that was Vitality. Vitality previously was the bottom tier team, but the roster had completely changed for this split, with the leader Selfmade being new to the roster and Crownshot finally settling in as the starting bot laner replacing Comp. But as the match was progressing, Astralis was getting in a more tougher spot by the minute, with their bot lane dying a lot and their jungler also put quite far behind, while the solo laners White Knight and MagiFelix attempted to carry the team, but to no avail, they were not able to do it. Astralis ended up losing the match and thus lost their chances at playoffs. Astralis barely managed to reach playoffs by ending 7th place by crucially losing to a Vitality, and with playoffs out of reach, Astralis was looking to restructure themselves after this turbulent start of a year. The only question remains is, what went exactly wrong? Besides the roster being not considered on par with better teams, a few players had shed some thoughts on the issues. MagiFelix first of all stated in numerous interviews that communication was mainly an issue, and as well as team cohesion. In Astralis' win towards the last week of the spring split versus SK Gaming, MagiFelix MagicFelix stated this.
I feel like the biggest thing is just what I've been working on is trying to, help my team like improve, because in the past I've usually been like always, focused on my own gameplay, and if I see like things that are not going so well in the team, I'm not the one to like be the one to try and change that, right? Like I'm not trying to help my teammates actually improve as much as I should be doing. So like since I came to Astralis, I've been trying to work on that, and that's like the biggest thing I'm like taking with me into summer as well.
In another interview with ESTNN, MagicFelix commented on his summer split issues.
I think like the biggest changes overall I've been trying to do is like trying to help like the team more in like trying to make sure that we have like good goals for like what we want to fix, because I feel like last split I wasn't really like vocal enough about what I need, from the team to like be like a threat in the game. So I'm like working more now to make sure that we are better like playing like, together as a team to like make sure that we can like have more impact in the early game.
Right on.
That is like our biggest focus right now.
Reflecting on the Mad Lions loss in July 2021, MagicFelix mentioned how they couldn't close it.
We kind of struggled to close out the game before we got outskilled, so that feels kind of bad for us.
This, of course, again, reflects how Astralis roster had struggles closing games via their leads. In an interview with Ashley Kang on the LEC broadcast, MagicFelix stated how the team was somewhat improving in regards to their nervousness, which he thinks is the primary cause as to why they won more games in Summer Split than Spring Split.
Our nerves in the game like have been going like a lot better like recently, like in Summer Split compared to before. Like I feel like we are way more calm and like confident in our plays now, and we like are willing to pull the trigger like when we need to. So I think it's been like a good improvement for us in that sense. I think also like why we are like winning more games on stage now than we did before in spring.
Moreover, he also agreed that the team usually has an uneasy early game.
Astralis doesn't always have the strongest early game. However, Astralis is also finding those victories after victories.
Again, with Ashley Kang in July 2021, MagicFelix thought that his team was capable of performing well as long as they are free from any worry, and he also wanted improvements in how Astralis played the early game.
Our biggest weaknesses so far have been like in the early game. Like I feel like every time we are like behind in the early game, and it's kind of rough to play the game, But when we are ahead, we like snowball the game really quickly. So I feel like if we can like fix these early game mistakes, then I think we'll be a lot better as a team.
In an interview with Hotspawn right after he joined Astralis, MagicFelix said that
I think the biggest part is that in general in team fights we have a mixed understanding of what we are doing. Some people will target one guy and the others will target another, and we'll split up in different directions. If we're running away, we're not running away in the same path, So I would say there are a few coordination issues. That's the biggest thing I've noticed since joining.
The Swedish newspaper Expressen released an interview with Felix in February 2021, and MagicFelix was quoted to say, "I was quite nervous before the first match on the LEC stage. That's usually me before I go to compete." The caster Foxdrop also said that MagicFelix is the best European solo queue player of all time, and then of course his comment continued with that he was missing something from being special, which has already been mentioned in this video. Watching Astralis' games, it feels like their biggest issue is lack of consistency. So there's a lot of evidence and statements that points towards team cohesion and that inconsistent early game being the prime causes for Astralis struggling. The interview I had with MagicFelix suggested that in a nutshell the results were simply because mediocre players get mediocre results, that being mediocre for LEC standards of course. In hindsight, MagicFelix personally thinks that the performance was decent and slightly above his own expectations when he joined, even though they were dead last on paper. He attributes better team cohesion, strategy and more effective ways of practicing than other teams as a way to overcome the mediocre results. Since Astralis never did succeed on those parts, MagicFelix thought that it just simply wasn't enough to make up for the skill deficit that they had at the beginning of the season. However, at the end of 2021 Summer Split in LEC, MagicFaker would not be resigned by Astralis. The narrative surrounding this was, how do I put it? Confusing to say the very least, at least. In a season recap video, the coaches of Astralis mentioned how the roster was created to develop talent, with the players of course being coachable. The roster would be a long-term plan to foster their skills.
So for us it wasn't really about big names, it was more about signing people we believe in terms of what makes a good team and the individual aspects that are required in order to do so. So the players we scouted basically had these qualities in them. We believed in them from the start, but of course this was a long-term project from the very start, so we had to
The coaches also mentioned how the Summer Split was conforming to the plans they had set out with, and the main coach AOD also mentioned how Astralis was going to keep most of their team because of the long-term policy they had and that they didn't have any issues with the players. This was of course released in August, but 3 months later in November things had changed a bit. Both Jeskla, the ADC, and MagicFelix were released from Astralis. I'm not entirely sure what the quick change in opinion was due to, but perhaps it could be attributed to some internal conflict conflict, in the sense that the management had other plans than that of the coaches. The November video, which showed the off-season changes that Astralis had done, argued that MagiFelix was not a good fit inside and outside the game.
We just felt that Felix was not a good fit for us inside the game, outside the game as well, and we just felt it was really important that we get someone that kind of qualifies for our vision of what people have to do in the game especially.
AOD would further argue that their vision for someone occupying the mid lane spot would be 1. Someone who moves more on the map, 2. Gets more involved with the team, in the sense that one commits with the team even if you don't agree with the play being made, 3. MagiFelix wasn't a risk taker generally speaking. This could be in how he chooses the champs he wants to play on stage, or maybe even in scrims. No risk taking in the map moment or in calls being made about the game. But all of this of course requires some context at the very least. In regards to MagiFelix not being a risk taker is true, but that is the package deal you get with MagiFelix. Felix has always had a reputation of being a careful and methodical player. This fact has been corroborated by former teammates such as from his time in Fnatic Rising or Movie Star Riders. However, the first point of him not being someone who moves more on the map does seem weird to say the least. It's a point I would personally doubt. From what I know at least, MagiFelix has a high level of macro knowledge. I don't think that's controversial to say. I personally think that if he doesn't move on the map, there might not be a reason to do so, speaking on a macro level of course. For example, this one interview of him playing mid lane, he stated that he just moves out of vision to pressure the enemy team, but he doesn't actually roam. He just stays out of vision and then makes the enemy think that he roams. But I mean, Astralis might have another vision of what a mid laner should be. Maybe they wanted a mid laner who is way more aggressive, does flip plays and play makes, you know, each to their own standards. Now as for point 2, I see more credence. After all, MagiFelix isn't very much known for having a vocal voice in a team. You can see this in, for example, some of Astralis' mic check episodes. And in here, MagiFelix doesn't usually say a lot or contribute to making shot calls being made in the team or when a team fight is happening. But this is of course heavily edited, so we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes here. But I think this is also exactly why Promiscu had a spot on Astralis for a very long time, even though his performance wasn't relatively perceived to be good. He was good at shot calling and very vocal, and that's a trait that Astralis seemed to like. But many people who were watching LEC wouldn't perceive Promiscu to be a good player, because he did a lot of questionable things. MagiFelix, however, did multiple times state in interviews that he was actively attempting to improve on this front. So it was a work in progress kind of thing, and coupled with the fact that he has social anxiety, stage nervousness, etc., it takes a longer time to quote-unquote fix this issue. One of the most interesting takes I've seen on MagiFelix comes from Peter Dunn, the current Team Heretics coach, and he said in February 2021 that if you are an NA rookie, heed lessons of MagiFelix about why branding matters. This is a player passed on for LEC for years, despite consistently insane solo queue performances, because he was 24-25, but he was 19 at the time. Choker, maybe in one series 3 years ago versus Mad in the Spanish National League 2018. Flat track bully, who only looks good because of UK ERL, while ignoring performances at EUM. Narrative matters. If you don't shape your own, someone else will do it for you, and they don't always have your interests at heart. Some will scout properly and look past it, many will not. I asked Peter Dunn if he could elaborate his take on MagicFelix today, and interestingly enough, Team Heretics did offer MagicFelix a coaching position to him in between the 2022 to 2023 offseason. He simply believes that he doesn't want to play competitively because there's other things he's pursuing in life. This of course is an opinion by him and not factual, just what he believes basically. Mr. Dunn also said that he was insanely good at theory crafting builds and adapting to the circumstances presented to him. We know this because MagicFelix would experiment with things in solo queue a lot, so it was easy for people to see his thought processes. He was a bit quiet on stage and not the best at expressing his ideas to teammates, even though his ideas were often really good ideas. He alleges that MagicFelix also felt the need of having a good coach to help him get out of his shell. You see, the problem here is that he was in reality expected to be a leader on the teams he was a part of, but according to Peter Dunn, the best situation for MagicFelix would have been to have him on a North American team with a vocal jungler, and then let him focus on his own play. Communication from your mid laner in a team is important, but mid and jungle is considered as a dual lane, and you can get the communications from your jungler rather than your mid laner if you have to. So both Astralis and his last team Misfits were not the right team environments that would not enable a player like MagicFelix to succeed. MagicFelix did agree with the Peter Dunn statements here. He said that he had played with a lot of vocal junglers over his careers like Dan, G, Zanzara, and it makes it way easier to play when it's always clear what your jungler is planning ahead, because they are the centerpiece of the early game. However, MagicFelix thinks that when it comes to synergy, team relations matter way more to to him than things such as in-game communication. Over his competitive journey, he found that the biggest team problems usually are created by tension between players building up over time, which in turn negatively affects everyone's motivation to focus on the game, and if you are on good terms with people, it's way easier to give or receive constructive feedback. MagicFelix also goes on to talk about his retrospective look on his career.
I think I was always a top player for ER level and the best solo queue player in EU for a few years around 2017 to 2018. I could have joined the LCS LEC earlier if I put effort into it, because my level of play around that time was high enough for it.
And regarding the criticism against him, he said,
I do think I play noticeably worse in high stakes games. That goes for many other players too though. At Worlds, if you compare scrims with how teams actually play on stage, it's a night and day difference in terms of performance. The teams that win seem to be those that play the most like themselves in scrims. Through the power of hindsight, there's many things I could have done better, but I'm still happy with what I accomplished. There's not many who can say they were the best at something. And hey, I also won 7 National League championships?
And what about the narrative part that Peter Dunn talked about? That too is important, because again, in the Swedish newspaper article, MagicFelix did talk about the rumors surrounding him. There has been much discussion that shyness may have been a factor. To clear it up, is there any truth to it, or does it feel like an exaggeration? What is written on the internet about me is a big exaggeration, but based on reality. I had more problems when I started my career with the nerves before the games and expressing my opinions in the team. These are things that I have worked on and made great progress on over the years, but it feels like people's opinions of me haven't changed at the same rate as myself, and they are often exaggerated. MagicFelix eventually fizzled out of the competitive scene. He wouldn't get re-signed by Astralis and then got picked up by Misfits, being a substitute player for both their LEC team and their LFL team. He wouldn't be seen playing any matches under the organization officially though. It is truly a sad tale regarding MagicFelix, almost as if there is a dark truth behind him, and that being is that the early rumors surfaced unfairly, if I might add, by his former Turkish teammate Elvin in YouthCrew esports. But even so, MagicFelix rose up and quiet literally like a phoenix from their ashes, and he would eventually join LEC through a stark opportunity. However, it just wasn't right. This player still required an environment to develop himself, a right, proper environment to foster this EU talent. But this was never realized, even in an environment in Astralis which sought to have this long-term development with a long-term roster. With the discussion I had with Peter Dunn, the Team Heretics coaching stint could have been a real possibility of seasoning MagicFelix, at least with the conversation I had with Peter Dunn. According to MagicFelix, this would be a multi-positional coaching position, which would help with strategy and other game-related stuff. MagicFelix says that this wasn't really what he had in mind, and already by this point he was thinking of taking an indefinite break from the game. However, he was open to doing it, but the negotiations between the two parties ultimately failed in the end. So, what happened to MagicFelix? This question is inevitable as we humans are curious. So as you know at this point, I had an interview with MagicFelix and he told me that he stopped playing competitively and is also taking solo queue less serious. You see, while Mr. Felix was still playing actively, competitive wasn't his highest priority because he never thought he could become one of the best, competitively speaking. But in regards to solo queue, he felt he had more of a shot of becoming the best, and he also saw that the solo queue environment was more in his own hands in terms of how he performed. MagicFelix saw that success in competitive play was largely determined by how good teammates you managed to get on your team is, and with Astralis' talent being mediocre, further reinforced this worldview. So in the end, MagicFelix ended up putting most of his efforts into solo queue, and goddamn did he succeed well. But as to what he does these days, he simply told me that he's now studying whatever he finds interesting or useful in regards to anything that helps you take better actions in regards to things you value. In the recent years, we've seen an outflow of people being discouraged from the stagnation and, forgive me for the lack of a better term, but degeneracy of the competitive scene. Ellis has mentioned recently in his final stream of being discouraged. Max Waldo, the head coach of C9, completely left the league scene, albeit winning the LCS just before its full retirement. And of course, MagicFelix no longer playing competitively, mainly because of how little control he has in terms of his competitive performance. There's this one article from Bloomberg that suggests that the long-term professional gaming lifestyle is just not sustainable, but pundits like LS and Nemesis suggest that the pro scene is incompetent. There's this idea that most pro teams are literally hiring off Reddit and what the public perceives to be a good player, but no matter. People will eventually move on from League of Legends in their life, and you know that's just the nature of any sport and indeed of life. And the only good news that we have here is that there is no shortage of new players. New eras will arise as time comes by, but for me, personally speaking, I enjoyed the MagicFelix storyline and his incredible accomplishments.
But anyways, what about you, Mr. Obama? What did you think about the story of MagicFelix?
Before you go, I just want to thank CyberGhost VPN for sponsoring today's video. If you're looking for an excellent VPN service for an incredible price, click on the link in the description for complete digital privacy for just a little bit over $2 per month.